podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Factory of the Future. I'm here with A.W. Schultz. I'm Alexandria Burek, and today we are talking about temperature-controlled factories. So I was having a conversation with somebody who's also in the manufacturing industry, and being from the Midwest, being winter, it's cold. And the factory was really cold, and then that posed a question. Why aren't factories as a standard temperature controlled? I look back on many of the days walking through the factories, whether it be in the summer and it was really hot or the winter and it was very cold. I always had sympathy for the employees who were working in these extreme temperature conditions. It wasn't until I started working with AW and doing this podcast and being exposed to maintenance and reliability that it also led me to think about how is this temperature variation affecting the equipment that we're using to manufacture our goods? And would there be a benefit to making temperature controlled factories the standard for the future? So AW and I did some research, and turns out the swinging temperatures affect the maintenance and reliability of the machinery, which I think is obvious, but not really talked about through this lens. It affects employees. And I think that there's a lot of uncertainty about whether or not factories are going to be filled with people in the future or robots. But I think either way, if it is going to be a people factory, people do better in temperature controlled environments. If it's a robotics factory where, it's a dark factory and people aren't there, those pieces of equipment would do better in a temperature controlled environment as well. And it turns out they're more energy efficient, which we've talked a little bit about the shortage of energy. So today we're just going to have a thoughtful conversation of, do we think factories should be temperature controlled going forward? So AW, what are you thinking?
Initially, yes, they need to be comfortable. But as kind of where it leads into the question is it affordable and cost effective? And when you pose this question to me, I initially go, well, it's every factory I've worked at or been through, it's usually been a question about what is the product they're making, and that usually has led to why is it climate controlled, whether it be I'm thinking just like the foods industry or even in the oil and gas, a lot of times they'll be outdoors, but they'll have heat traces that keep the pipes warm, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the employees' side of it. What I've also seen is working down south is, we won't have it necessarily temperature controlled, but we'll give them unwritten rules. We'll give them like space heaters or foggers in the summer times. But to your question is why isn't the entire place temperature controlled? Because it can have an effects on the reliability of the equipment. And easy answer is I'm not. There's a cost to it, and you were bringing up the benefits to it, because I know certain equipments, lubricants and other things, they tend to like to have a thresholds of having degrees over 140 degrees. I forget I did a training on it one time. That if you go over, somebody can call me out being wrong, but if you start going over 170 degrees, you degrade the effectiveness of the lubricant by whatever percentage. But in retrospect, if you're controlling the temperature, you're controlling all the equipment, and you're making it more predictable, and that's I think that's what Alexandria is trying to bring forward is into being more predictable and reliable as a whole facility as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So, like some of the things we found when we were researching this is that, you know, the heat is going to diminish and reduce the lifespan of your equipment. So, there's a cost to that, right? So, like maybe on the upfront, invest in making your factory a temperature controlled factory, but you're extending the lifespan of every piece of equipment within that factory. So, I think there's value to that. You know, AW and I have talked and had many people on the podcast who have shared that there's a real concern about energy. We're all hearing about these energy concerns, especially with these AI data centers and the energy that they're, you know, requiring. So what we also found was that temperature controlled factories are much more energy efficient. Okay. So if we're trying to reduce our consumption of energy or the cost of that, having a temperature controlled factory seems to make sense to me. So those are some of the things. And I think that like just from a breakdown or failure, what we found is that when factories are not temperature controlled, there's more rejects, there's more defects. So there's a cost associated to that. I think if somebody were to actually spend the time and energy to do a study on this, which maybe you could do this in your PhD program, but like, what is the true cost of of not having a temperature controlled factory where the product doesn't require it?
Well, you just nailed it on the way. Data centers have to be temperature controlled. And
Oh,
why do we have to,
very
why
much.
do they have to be temperature controlled? Because they overheat.
Yeah.
And so what is that? I'd like to see that cost benefit. Like who makes that decision?
Well, that's a product. Okay, so the way I'm going to think about a data center, or my friend actually builds data centers. He's become an expert in doing this. He formerly used to build marijuana grow op facilities, which is a very temperature controlled
Yeah,
environment.
absolutely.
Okay, so you know when you're thinking about it like that, those to me are product driven decisions that you can't have a data center without having an amazing temperature control um, mechanism, right? System. You can't have a marijuana grow facility without temperature controlled systems. You can't have food manufacturing without having temperature controlled. You can't do pharmaceuticals. All those types of products are driving the decision to make the factories or the warehouses temperature controlled. But I'm saying let's reverse it and say, okay, even if I'm manufacturing steel drums, which is the company that I work for, we manufacture steel drums. Steel is affected, okay, by temperature swings. So what percentage of our metal becomes not usable because of the condensation and later the rust, right? What percentage of our products are becoming defective or rejected because of the condensation, right? That occurs. Like one of the things I learned early in my career, in our industry, it's uncommon, but we use semi trailers to store our finished products. Well, if we let our steel drums sit for too long throughout many weather cycles, by the time we're done, that 7, 8, 10, 15, $20,000 load of drums sitting in a trailer ends up becoming completely useless and having to be rerun through the factory because of the rust in the water. So those are real costs that continue to add up. So you add your failures, your breakdowns, your inability to start the machinery because it's too cold, the lost material. You know, there seems to be a case to be made even where the product doesn't necessarily require it, that the upside is so much better to just take that capex and put it towards a controlled environment.
Yeah, yeah, no,
But no one's talking about it. And I just think we're just nobody's talking about it. Nobody's really thinking about it. But I think we really need to start.
no, I agree. I mean, you're talking about we did an episode recently on the different kinds of waste, and
Right.
this brings it to light. And
Yeah.
I like this topic because I never opened my mind to just why from the offset, I just like, well, it's just based on the finished product that you're making, why it's temperature controlled. But
Yeah.
I have been in under factories where the temperature doesn't play an impact on it, but it was still climate controlled. And I think it was because we'll say the labor was a high dollar amount, and that played an impact on keeping them employed. They wanted a comfortable environment, and the question is why aren't more? And it comes down to it's a for-profit organization, and that's kind of what they're electing to do on it. But to your point is like what's that threshold?
What's the hidden cost? There's hidden costs that they're incurring as a result of not making temperature controlled factories. And even if you take a very aggressive or like very conservative, I've seen paybacks in my research that could happen as soon as 2 to 4 years, as long as 7 years. Even if a company had to wait 7 years to receive their payback, I think it's a worthwhile investment, right? Because also CapEx is a tax deduction. So that's a good investment in most cases, right?
Yeah.
And I guess with current political climate or tax structure in the US, any manufacturing company that's building new factories might want to consider starting out of the gates with temperature because they have 100% bonus depreciation. Right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think some of those older factories. I mean, today, the idea is, you put skylighting in, you insulate well, and those things can certainly pay back or have benefits to it.
Immediate, yeah.
Myself, I think of it that way. That's
it would
an
be
interesting posed question, and I'd welcome anybody that's got some experience or history in this to reach out, because you put some questions out there that are just interesting to me that I take for granted on some of these explanations, but I'd like to just like dissect it a little bit more. And
honestly, that might be interesting for you and your chapter to have a discussion about, right? So this is at the heart of maintenance and reliability. You're running a chapter where that's what you guys are all coming from various backgrounds in. Maybe pose a question out to your network and see if anybody has any ideas or experience or strong opinions about this.
Yeah, I might do that. I'll pose that question. But
cool.
Yeah,
cool. All right, so I think we're clocking out.
Yeah, we're clocking out. This is a episode on insulation, heating, and
temperature controlled factories. Let's go.
Factory.
Yeah,
I got to think it's probably the first one out there, maybe, huh?
I would like to think so.
All right, we're checking out like finished goods. All right, goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.